So you're about to retire with predominantly all of your assets in pre-tax money. And if you're doing so, you're probably also wondering, how do we limit our lifetime tax liability, yet make the most out of our retirement? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today in our case study with a 6-year-old couple that is retiring. And if this is your first time watching, my name is Kyle Kuyat of Retirement Redefined and co-founder of Defining Wealth. As always, joined by my main man, Jake Gardner.
Ready to go.
Jake, without any further ado, man, let's get into it today. Let's talk through our couple, Johnny and Jill. They're about to be retired, and they're faced with the question of, look, we want to do the things we want to do in retirement, but we're also trying to thread this needle and figure out how to lower our lifetime taxes because we're well aware if we don't do anything about it, we're probably in for a rude awakening come RMD time.
I want to kind of walk through how do we look at the overall net worth and then drill down into their goals. We'll go through their goals and spending, and then we'll talk a little bit about what are some things we would recommend from a tax management standpoint to increase their probability of success, but also give them some more flexibility as they get to RMD age. So let's jump into this. First, Johnny and Jill, they are 60 years old and they have a 26-year-old son. Jimmy is not retired, as you can see there by his last name. They have a 401k, an IRA for Jill, and an IRA for Johnny. Those are all pre-tax, like Kyle mentioned. So there's really no way out of paying taxes. It's just, when do we choose to pay taxes and how much is the real question here. To give you a quick overview of their goals, they want to retire, right? So they've retired essentially at 59 and a half. They want to spend $8,000 a month on retirement expenses. They have healthcare costs that we're baking in at the national average. And they want to travel a little bit. So you can see every year we're going to spend an additional $8,000 on travel. You'll see that broken down in the cash flow section where that comes in. And they want to do that until Jill is 80.
And one thing here, Jake, that you bring up a good point of their travel. When we're creating these plans for people, we don't want to just create a plan that maybe is the most tax efficient on paper, but doesn't allow you to do the things that you work so hard to do.
Yeah.
Which is really, on paper, that might be a successful plan. But in reality, if you're not doing the things you want to do, you're pinching pennies in retirement, you're not spending the money that you work so hard to save for, then what are we doing, right?
Yeah. What is retirement all about if we're not spending the money that we've worked hard for on things that make retirement good?
Yeah. But on the flip side of that coin, we want to be responsible and we want to spend it the most strategic way possible. So
not $50,000 vacations every year?
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. We can take a look at that while we go through this. So their income, not super important what they made previously, but we are using that as an estimate for their Social Security benefits. When it comes through, we've got $4,100 for Johnny and $2,700 for Jill there. And then I want to kick over to the retirement tab because this is where a lot of the planning magic happens. And by the way, as you're looking at this, like this is the same tool that we use with our clients. This is the same tool that you have access to if you enter into our Retirement HQ course too.
Yeah, we have a link down below for that if you're more of a DIY retiree, but you want access to the same tools we utilize, Right Capital. We also have Income Lab, which we'll share in a different video. Then you can go ahead and click the link down below to gain access for that and follow along yourself.
Yeah. So first of all, you can see all of the assumptions we've baked into here are being run 1,000 times through really bad market scenarios, really good ones via Monte Carlo analysis. But if we look over here at the comparison, you can see obviously if we retire at 60 until we have Social Security kick in, our assets come down a bit because we're living on a slightly increased withdrawal rate, right? If I go back here to retirement details, you can see that withdrawal rate starts out in the upper 9 and then even stretching into the 10 to 12% range before dropping all the way down to 4.8, 4.9% range later on. That's okay, right? We talked about that just a second ago. We want to be able to spend the money that we worked so hard for in retirement. It's okay if there's an elevated early spend and then we drop that down when Social Security kicks in by taking less withdrawals from the portfolio to support that lifestyle. That can be doable. And you can see that here with the probability of success. And if you're looking at just how much money do I have saved at retirement, we have 1.3 at age 60. It drops down to about 930,000 and then starts to climb again once Social Security kicks back in.
Yeah. So what are some of the things, Jake, that we could consider here as far as levers, right? There's a lot of levers we can pull, which is I always tell people. And sometimes it feels like you have less levers to pull when the majority, if not all of your money is in pre-tax accounts, but that doesn't mean you can't do anything about it. So what are some of the things that we could consider here as far as saying, hey, Johnny and Jill, here's the things that you could do to make this as tax efficient as possible while still doing the things that you want to do.
Yeah. So one of the things we could talk about, just not related to the taxes quite yet, but one of the things we can talk about is what's that retirement expense lever, right? So the retirement monthly expenses here, those are not including housing expenses. First of all, I want to point that out. So that's not necessarily listed here, but if you go to the cash flow map, you can see that housing expenses are baked in on top of that, as well as healthcare expenses. So the living expenses truly are going to indicate simply what we're spending on food, really, I mean, travel, but we even have that broken out differently. But these are the things just to keep daily life moving. So if we go back here and we pull some of these levers, you can see, and I'm going to go back to comparison so we can see the comparison here. Let's say we wanted to spend $9,000 a month early on in retirement. You can see that that affects how much we have in invested assets, and it gives us you can sort of see it in let's get rid of the current plan there. You can see that even when Social Security kicks in, it doesn't necessarily help us to recover back to where we were before. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that the probability of success drops. And all that's telling us is how likely is it we have to make an adjustment to spending at some point throughout this plan based off this snapshot in time.
And going back to what you were saying, we said $9,000 early for retirement, but that has them spending $9,000 a month really for the rest of retirement. So
forever.
In that situation, maybe it's, hey, we want to spend $9,000 a month from 60 to 70, but maybe when we cut back a little bit at 70 or 75 or 80, if they want to stop travel like we mentioned before, then that obviously can change the plan as well.
Right. So let's return this back to where it was. I wanted to make sure you saw the lever there and just what it has to do with the comparison. But let's talk a little bit about how do we manage a retirement where all of our income is pre-tax? What should we be thinking about? What are some levers we can pull to help us out on a tax side? So for that, I'm going to pop over to our tax strategies page and walk through some of the things we'd be thinking about with Roth conversions that could help us from a required distribution standpoint and maybe level out our tax liabilities over time. If we go to calibration, I'm just going to show you what if we fill up the 10% tax bracket. We're going to start there. Let's start small. Well, that doesn't really do much. You can see conversions look like they happen out here, but that's basically because people have died and we're converting at that point. That's not really realistic. However, if we look at the 12% tax bracket, we'll have some years later on in retirement where we have room to do more conversions, right? And so if we're converting here from 67 throughout the rest of those years until 83, then we're starting to reduce the amount of RMDs early on, and then we're converting beyond that when we're living off our RMDs later in retirement too. You can see here there's a $295,000 benefit in tax-adjusted assets from doing that. And where that's coming from is you can see the federal taxes paid, and then after taxes are done being paid, the assets will simply grow tax-free after that. One of the reasons this is important is we've leveled out our tax journey a little bit where you can see this big spike. That's long-term care, which can always come into effect. If we have large expenses like long-term care, if we want to leave a legacy to our children, they're going to be left with all pre-tax dollars versus completely tax-free growth from, certainly when you started doing the conversions, but definitely your 80s and on would be where that tax-free growth really jumps up and we're not paying taxes anymore.
Yeah, and one of the things there too, some people might say, well, why are you waiting so long to do Roth conversions? And kind of going back to what we said before, this couple wants to spend more money early on. And after talking to thousands of you out there, I know a lot of you feel exactly the same way. Not everybody, but a lot of you that do. We don't want to necessarily convert over and above when we're spending more in those go-go years in the first decade or so of retirement. So that's why you see that conversion actually taking place once some of that spending falls off a little bit and once Social Security kicks in and you're not having to take as much out of the portfolio.
One thing I want to mention too, as we come back to the retirement analysis page, is you can see obviously the break even takes some time on a real dollar basis, right? So after taxes, we have a break even earlier on from those Roth conversions. But if you're looking at just how many dollars are actually in my accounts before taxes, then you're going to see from the current plan, there's that dip because we've done some Roth conversions. And you can see that shaded behind there. But then at the end, we see we've got $50,000 more of actual dollars in our portfolio before taxes because of the conversions we've done. That's those tax-free years of growth coming into play there. So there is actually a break even during their lives, but certainly for their heirs as well.
Yeah, and we mentioned this before. There's different trade-offs to this. If you're valuing legacy planning, then maybe you want to accelerate some of the conversions as well. If you're valuing, hey, you know what? I actually want to be a little bit more tax efficient. I don't need to go on as many trips. Then if you take those away, you can probably accelerate and start some of these conversions earlier, as we mentioned. Really comes down to trade-offs. But as much as anything, if you're in a similar situation, you're looking at it and you're saying, man, how do I limit my lifetime tax liability? But again, also still do the things that you want to do in retirement because that's what it's all about. Ultimately, we want you to have a retirement that feels and looks successful. But there's a part of that too for people, Jake, where they're like, look, I want the financial clarity. And typically the financial domino has to be the first thing to fall in line before all these other things become figure outable or a lot easier. So if you're looking for help with that, again, you can reach out to us. We have different ways that you can engage with us. Shoot us an email, give us a call. All that will be here on the screen. There's also a link down below to find time on our calendar. Or if you're looking to implement this yourself and get full access to this tool, as well as a few other ones that we have available for you, we have a link down below for that too.
Today, we wanted to show you this scenario specifically because it's easy to pick out the really, really big wins from clients that we work with and say, we can save you hundreds of thousands, millions in taxes or in just tax adjusted ending assets. This one's a little bit closer call. So we wanted to talk through some of the nuances of when the break even happens, what other trade-offs you would be considering, and why you might do this even if it was a close call, right? And so we appreciate you walking through this with us. I think this is a valuable exercise for anyone to go through, and you can obviously get access to it just like we talked about through our Retirement HQ.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.